Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Thanks to your TV, this is our corner of the television world and the internet world for that matter, where we can talk about the things that matter most to Oakville. And certainly the diversity and wide-ranging composition of our community is growing by the day. And Council and I have long shared a desire to make sure the town is as inclusive and equitable as possible, and that extends across the spectrum. And with us today are Rebecca Brooke and Nabil Roman and Andrew Tyrell, who are working on the 2021 Oakville Diversity and Inclusion Plan. And Andrew, who's a long-serving, well, his mom was an even longer serving president of the CCAH, but he has picked up the torch and for several years now, and he's serving as a consultant. And Rebecca Brooke is leading the work at the town, and Nabil Rahman is working with her. So Rebecca, with no further ado, please explain what kind of diversity and inclusion we're trying to create here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to, and thank you for having us with you today. We're really pleased to be here. As you mentioned, we are working on the 2021 Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan. It's a culmination of many years of work, more than 15 that I can remember, reporting to council and working through D&I issues, as we call them, different initiatives. And in 2017, we had conducted an inclusion assessment, and we wanted to build on that work. And so this year, we created an action plan that we took to council early in the year to make sure we were on the right path. And through the plan, we've been working closely with our community partners, and the plan has 8 key deliverables. So if I can go through them with you today, they are comprised of reviewing our policies and procedures. Of course, that's an important step to make sure that we have that groundwork in place. And we have a partnership with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion to support us with that work. The second deliverable is working through researching our best practices and conducting benchmarking initiative. There are global benchmarks around diversity, equity, and inclusion, so we're looking at those. The third is to also look at building on the initiatives that we've already had underway for so many years. The fourth is surveying our employees, really looking to find out, get a better understanding of the demographics of our employees and how they compare to our community demographics. And also understanding, what is the sense of belonging and what's that feeling our staff have about working at the town of Oakville. We're also, number 5 is establishing measures, because of course we have to action out what we want to do. And then 6 and 7 is community engagement. And it gets 2 key deliverables in our plan, because we're conducting our engagement in 2 phases, as Andrew probably knows very well. Our first phase was conducted over the summer. Definitely, we know through the pandemic, we couldn't necessarily be in person with everyone, but we did definitely want to make sure we got out to our community groups through virtual focus group and interviews. And then our second phase is what we're in right now, which is our engagement with the whole community. So we have a survey online, hard copies at all of our town facilities and community centers. We've also been out to food banks and churches. And then the last key deliverable really is to take all of the work that we've been doing and create a multi-year plan. And that is a key document for the town that will be presented to council and the public and all our community organizations and groups next year. So right. Andrew and his group have been part of that process.
So this really is a town plan, so that the town can reflect and represent its community, and not so much a concern about the community reflecting itself, right? This reminds me that, we started out with a town energy plan that was designed to make sure that the town's operations were as good with energy as possible, before we then launched a community energy plan, where we asked the community to get involved in energy conservation. So will we move on to a community diversity and inclusion approach after we after we cure our own house? Is that conceivable?
You're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. We are developing this action plan this year to kind of set that foundation so that we are getting our staff input and our community input so that when we develop our multi-year plan, it is a fulsome, holistic plan and that it will drive us for years to come.
All right. So, Nabil, what kind of public consultation are we talking about here? Are we going to be meeting with every single group in town? Are we going to be, will we ever be meeting in person? I'm not sure that any of us can answer that question, but what's our approach?
Yeah, so really good question, and we would love to connect with as many community groups as it's feasible, you know, with COVID protocols in place. But the two-phased approach that Rebecca mentioned. So in phase one, we conducted over 21 virtual focus groups. We invited over 90 community groups, and over 60 of them attended. And this was done in a virtual focus group fashion. Information was kept completely confidential, and we had, very much like we're having today, a very candid conversation around diversity and inclusion and in ways in which the town can support, enhance, and improve our programs and services. And you know, with the numbers with COVID, we have done in-person outreaches actually. So we were in all of our in our BIAs. So we were in Bronte, we were in Kerr Street, we're in downtown Oakville. We've been at food banks promoting the survey. We've been at our community centers. And we continue to leave space open for any organizations, as long as, you know, we're following those health and safety protocols, to engage with residents, to engage with community stakeholders. And you know, the objective is we want to get feedback, right? And we want to make feedback as accessible as possible for those who value diversity, which should be, you know, everybody. And we want to make the ability to receive information as accessible. So, you know, we're able to translate the survey into multiple different languages through technology. Rebecca mentioned there's hard copies of it for those who might find that to be more comfortable. And in going and doing these in-person outreaches, we've realized that, you know, the source of receiving information needs to also be as diverse as the, you know, communities that we're trying to interact with, so that it is accessible for everybody to provide that feedback.
Well, Andrew, have you been able to assist in terms of making sure that no group is left out? And have you seen your concerns addressed in the work so far?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but thanks for having me here today. I would say that the Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton was one of the first groups that the town of Oakville contacted to be involved in the focus group. And I really applaud them for their efforts. And when we sat down and we answered some of the questions that they had, they were not afraid to engage in those uncomfortable conversations. So I think that really shows that the town of Oakville is invested in this, invested properly, seeks information in a culturally sensitive and culturally appropriate way. And we felt comfortable in engaging in those comfortable conversations because we saw that they were being very well received. I mean, we said things such as, you have to understand that when we walk into the town of Oakville, there's not a lot of people that look like me. And looking at systemic barriers, you have to look at those issues and make that determination internally about what kinds of policies, hiring practices stand as barriers to having a more diverse workforce that reflects the town of Halton, or sorry, the town of Oakville, and reflects Halton in general as well.
Well, those are good points. Just 1 second. Andrew, has there been any reluctance on the part of the town to deal with, like there's some, what I'm perceiving is that there's an admission in the mainstream world of white people that racism is an issue for some people, but usually the recognition is, but not for me, and it's somebody else. And and when you read the press, even in Canada, I'm starting to see an effort to avoid discussions about systemic racism, to avoid discussions about microaggressions, and some of these other angles that people have come up with to try to raise the consciousness about how the deck looks stacked if you're not in the mainstream white population. So I was happy to hear that they hadn't, run away in terror when you brought up systemic barriers. But what about the rest of the cocktail? Are they dealing with that too?
Well, I would say that the notion that you bring up about people not believing that these kinds of things exist in Halton is alive and well. And that's why we have to have certain initiatives such as the Hate Doesn't Live Here initiative. There's a number of initiatives that the town of Oakville, working with their partners, have brought in. The Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton, we had a meals program that is everybody has heard about, where we serve 14,000 and some odd meals, and those meals were not to only Black people, because the Canadian Caribbean Association has a Caribbean and Black membership. It was to the community as a whole. And at the CCH, our notion is that the community has to do well as a whole in order for our Black people to do well. And if the community is not doing well, our people are not doing well. And we have been approached by the Halton Children's Aid Society. We're on their Race Equity Practices and Advisory Committee, as well as I sit on the Oakville Community Foundation Board of Directors. And right now they're going through a test pilot called the Reconciliation, Equity, Anti-Racism, and Board Diversity course that will give tools to various organizations that are coming to the Oakville Community Foundation seeking grants. And the Oakville Community Foundation has at least said, look, we understand that these are problems, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we want to make sure that people who are coming to us in order to fund some of their initiatives have at least a benchmark, have at least some basis that they can say that they have had their board, their volunteers, and their staff go through a diversity, equity, and inclusive course. So the CCH is piloting that for the Oakville Community Foundation, and it's made up of a board diversity section, a Indigenous perspective section, gender equity, and equity practices section. So those are some of the things that that the CCH is doing, and I think that that's why we've been approached. I think that in another forum we talked about our Community in Harmony Garden, which brings Indigenous practices in with the community garden that, in concert with the town of Oakville, is going to be up and running for the March and April season, and that's going to be a lovely garden where community all together can be there and be recognized, and being very they can see the extent to which the town of Oakville believes in multiculturalism as well as diversity and equity, and treat it not only as an issue that they have to deal with, but embrace it and treat it as a strength.
That's good to hear, because among other things, our founding story as a town involves three groups of people. Are the original Indigenous inhabitants of this area, the white people that they welcomed from all over the British Empire, and the Black people who almost immediately began coming, fleeing slavery in the United States. Sometimes assisted by some of those white settlers, but just as often assisted by the black settlers who'd come fleeing slavery and then would go back and bring more. So it's important that we understand that we have this origin in diversity, and together we've built a community of a fair amount of harmony and prosperity that's attracted more people from all over the world, of all creeds and faiths and colors and ethnicities, and it's really important to try to build on that foundation.
Yeah.
Council and I were very dismayed at the episode earlier this year where we discovered that our kids are being treating each other with racism and hatred. You know, any amount is too much, but more than we certainly thought, and way more than anybody could tolerate. So this is very important work, especially if it gets noticed and heeded by the younger generation. So that leads me to two questions, Rebecca. Are we including the younger generation, and can I safely assume that you have Indigenous input as well?
Absolutely, on both fronts. Nabil and I spoke directly to our youth. We actually participated with them in focus groups, and we've connected back with them. And they are alive and well in this community, and they're ready to make an impact. And it's so wonderful to kind of have them front and center at the table on this topic. And of course, with our Indigenous community, I mean, there's such a rich history in Canada and of course in Oakville with that community. And we want them front and center to this work as well. We had obviously ties in with them through our staff. We have a lot of different initiatives with our Indigenous community. We want to really make sure that that relationship stays strong through this action plan and through the work we are doing around truth and reconciliation. Definitely both of those groups. But like, as you mentioned, and as Andrew mentioned, as Nabil mentioned, it's about reaching out to the entire community. Like, our whole community is really important to this plan, and we want to make sure everyone feels a sense of belonging. When we look at our last citizen survey, inclusion and kind of that sense of belonging is very important to this community, and it ranks very high in terms of importance, and we do very well. So I think we're at 93% satisfaction. But Nabil and I can tell you, and I know Council echoes this, we want to do better all the time with that. We want to make sure that everyone feels included, and that means talking to youth, talking to our Indigenous community, talking to our faith groups, talking to all different groups, because the uniqueness is what then brings us together, and that fabric needs to be woven throughout our community.
Yeah, I don't know if it's widely known, but the Oakville community is more engaged with itself than any other community I know about. We have neighborhood associations, residents associations. We've got a baker's dozen at least, and I'm thrilled to tell you that more of them are organizing all the time. And I guess 12, 13 years ago, when I started the Community Leaders Roundtable for all of us to be able to get together every month, I don't think there was no diversity. I mean, we had good diversity between male and female, and that was about it.
Right.
And now its diversity is growing, and everyone's welcome. I've had expressions of interest from different groups, like the Arab community would like to have an Arab council, and I told them, well, how about you join the community council and get engaged with each other, so that and I really believe that if we see each other and work with each other, that the problems start to fall away, because we learn by working together that everybody has something to bring to the table. I've told some people the warmest welcome in Oakville is for a willing pair of hands when there's work to be done. And that's the greatest opening that you could ever want when you're moving into a place is volunteer. And all of a
And we
sudden,
don't have
boom,
a shortage in Oakville, do we?
Yeah,
We're just
boom,
so
you have a
lucky that
network,
way.
right?
We are.
So I'm fascinated by the community dimension of this. I mean, I understand very well the need of the town to reflect the community, but I'm very interested in hearing more about this community portion? What's that going to look like?
Well, I can tell you, Mayor, and you experienced it yourself when you were at the Emancipation Day celebration that CCAH had on August the 1st, and you greeted that over 250 people that filed through in a very COVID-friendly drive-through environment where we had meals and a number of other activities for kids, and sent out a lot of virtual entertainment. That our strength is not only serving the demographics that we belong to. Our strength is really embracing everybody equally. We're talking about race, but it also goes to gender equity as well. And you were there as you welcomed each and every one of them, as I introduced you to each and every one of those people that came through that day. And I can tell you that the feedback about your involvement, various other politicians from all the levels of government and their involvement that day has been heartwarming, and everybody's proud to have that dynamic here in Halton. The other thing that we are doing in combination with Sheridan College, it's actually being led by Sheridan College, but it's a sense of belonging survey that we have undertaken over the summer months. It started in around July and it ended at the end of October. And that work was spearheaded by a conversation that Wendy Ranella, the CEO of Oakville Community Foundation, and myself had. And then we got Sheridan involved. And Oakville Community Foundation has been fundamental in that sense of belonging survey. And I would hope that now that our data research has come to an end, that the town of Oakville will leverage that in their own plans. It's really a rich and dynamic source of information for people who are Halton residents.
Well, Nabil, I saw you nodding. Is that because this information is the kind of stuff that you're looking for?
It absolutely is, Mr. Mayor. And I think, to your question about the community, we recognize that as a municipality, we are part of a community. And sometimes our role is to be a conduit. Sometimes our role is to amplify the voices of the community and the fantastic work that Andrew and CCAH and other community organizations are doing, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're simply playing a part in enhancing the voices of the community. And to everyone's point, when we talk about a sense of belonging, it's really about being heard. And as Oakville is getting more diverse and historically was very diverse, I think a tidbit here, in 1856, our Black population in Oakville was at 20% of the community. We have a history of diversity. We want to hold true to that diversity, and we want to amplify the voices. So very much the multi-year diversity and inclusion action plan has an emphasis on recognizing when information needs to flow bottom up. We need to amplify the voices, and we need to be willing partners, and we need to invest in equity and diversity. And with all the wonderful work that the community is doing, sometimes we just have to be part of those conversations and share in those resources.
That's a great point. So, Rebecca, how is the timetable working? Are you on time? Are you going to when are you going to deliver?
We are absolutely on time. We're making such great progress. We have a wonderfully engaged group of staff, and we have a wonderful community we're working with. It's not a lone effort, as we know. Diversity, inclusion, and equity work is not a lone effort. So there's many of us behind Nabil and I talking today. And we plan to be at council in the new year, earlier than later, of course. So we're working well onto our plan. One thing I wanted to mention, and I did want to say this, is what we're hearing from the community is so important to us. So please, please everyone continue with letting us know how we're doing, what you'd like to see. And one of the things that we heard along the way, and I think we can all speak to this, is everybody's ready for action. everybody, we're ready to see that happen. And that's why we call, what we're doing right now is an action plan, and then developing a multi-year plan, because that's what it is. And the work that Andrew talked about, some of that foundational research piece that talks to what the community wants, that will absolutely be integrated into our plan, because it's about taking action now. We're ready to move forward. We've done a lot of work, and we're ready to come out with actions for the community and for our organization that hopefully that council is proud of. I know that you've been such a major supporter of ours. So to bring it forward, the culmination of all this work, and early next year will be our goal.
So it sounds to me like the front part of the title of the thing, the 2021 part, almost doesn't belong there. It's an action plan for the future,
Yes.
rather than an action plan for a given year. Am I right about that?
I love the way you worded that. Thank you. You're absolutely correct.
All right. Well, then it's onward and upward. Andrew, what do you think we need in order to deliver a big success the way our community wants? Because I agree with Rebecca. We're all tired of the talk, and we all want action.
I would think that what the community wants to see right away is what I mentioned probably about 15 or 20 minutes ago, is that it wants to see when it walks into the town of Oakville to access those services, be it pay their taxes, or request a permit for a sports ground, or sign up for swimming lessons, or anything like that, that they want to see that themselves are reflected in those employees. So they want to go in there and they want to see people that look like them. They just don't want to see what the stereotypical affluent Oakville person is. They want to look, they're involved in the community, they're part of the community, so they want to see people who reflect that. So that's really what I would say would be a real win at the end of this, is that Oakville understand its hiring practices and really make inroads into the various communities to attract that talent, because that talent is there, and it is top talent.
Thank you. That is a perfect closing word. Thank you for being with us, and I hope to see you next time on Oakville Matters.